الله بالخير. في عصر الأخبار الكاذبة والمعلومات المضللة والسياسات المحرضة على الانقسام واستقطاب المخترعين، بات من المهم فهم تأثير الكوميديا السياسية ولا سيما برامج الأخبار الناعمة في الرأي العام والسياسة الخارجية الأمريكية. ما تبعات الاعتماد على برامج الأخبار الناعمة كمصدر للمعلومات في القضايا والأحداث الوطنية والدولية؟ هل تعزز مشاهدة الأخبار الناعمة نزعة الانعزالية بين الأمريكيين الغافلين عن الأحداث العامة؟ وكيف يؤثر الرأي العام في السياسة الخارجية الأمريكية؟ لماذا تطبق الرقابة المكارثية على حق حرية التعبير في أمريكا اليوم؟ نرحب بكم ونرى ونسمع أكثر من ضيفنا لي كامب الكوميدي والناشط الأمريكي في البعد الأقرب. هذه الميادين وأنا زينب صفار، خليكم ويانا. Lee Camp is an American stand-up comedian and activist, host and writer of the series The Most Censored News, former host and writer of the comedy show Redacted Tonight on RT America, author of Bullet Points and Punchlines. Lee Camp, salam and welcome to Al Mayadeen. This is the Proximate Aspect and I'm Zainab Al-Safar. So good to have you, Lee.
Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. Well, according to our reference document, the Matthew Baum book, Soft News Goes to War, the media's influence on public opinion has evolved. The public became attentive to foreign policy crises involving the actual or potential use of military force. The line between information and entertainment is becoming increasingly blurred. Watching soft news programs gets people who would otherwise have little interest in foreign affairs to pay attention to international crises. As an expert in this field, Lee, what effects might arise from relying on soft news shows for information about serious national or international political issues or events?
Well, I would argue that all of the news that we get, at least I'll just speak for the West here in the United States, all of it is entertainment of one brand or another, even though the mainstream media, some of them, the legacy news channels, as they're called, even though they claim to not be entertainment, they are, in fact, biased. They are putting weight on their words. They are choosing the thing that gets the most clicks or eyeballs. So it's all a form of entertainment. I personally combine comedy with news in order to get people to pay attention and help people be able to tune in longer, because we live in a world of very short attention spans. But I would argue that our mainstream, quote unquote, legacy media, which is supposed to be the big channels, they might not use comedy the way I do, but they use many other tricks to get people to pay attention. And usually to pay attention to distractions, to pay attention to things that are not the actual deep core understanding of these issues. And so it's been very successful, I think, what they do at pushing propaganda. Like you said, people are paying attention to these issues more maybe than ever before. But they're also, many people are misunderstanding these issues maybe more than ever before. So yeah,
what are the negative repercussions of relying about the news on such kind of shows, the soft news shows?
Well, if you're talking about U.S. Mainstream soft news media, then yeah, it's like I just said, it's propaganda, it's lies. It is It is designed to facilitate the continued U.S. hegemony, our ostensible ownership of the world, and it succeeds in getting a lot of Americans and a lot of people in the West to believe this nonsense. I mean, it succeeded in getting most Americans to support the unilateral invasion of Iraq that killed a million people, and you can go down the list. But of course, it's incredibly harmful.
Right. So, well, the evidence, Lee, the author of this book suggests that the dramatic proliferation of entertainment-oriented informational television programming over the past 3 decades has had substantial effects on public awareness of certain events, as you said also, as well as a handful of other similarly high-profile political issues. This rising awareness, primarily among individuals not normally inclined to follow politics or foreign affairs, holds potentially far-reaching implications for public attitudes towards politics and foreign policy, and hence for public policy outcomes. How does public opinion affect U.S. foreign policy in this sense, Lee?
I mean, I'd argue it right now it does not, because we have a system that is bought out by corporate America.
It's top, bottom, not bottom, top.
Yeah, foreign policy is decided by the top, the ruling class, and what Americans want to happen never happens. A large Princeton study has proven that 0% of the time do Americans get something through Congress that does not align with corporate America. This means there's a tiny cabal of individuals who decide our foreign policy. It does not matter what your average American wants. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that with the propaganda, they're not trying to stop a revolution or a rising up. There have been large protests across America for various issues. So people are getting active, people get angry, but we have not changed the policy. The invasions continue, the economic sanctions continue. It doesn't change.
Right. Well, experts say that attacks on free speech are rising across the US of A. In the wake of the Russian military operation in Ukraine, RT America, the US branch of Russian national media outlet, has been permanently shut down with more than 100 staffers laid off. Lee, for 8 years, you hosted a satire comedy show, Redacted Tonight, on RT. Today, you are being banned on so many platforms. Over 1,000 videos were all deleted on YouTube. Why? How do you view the shutdown of RT America and the one-sided information about Russia in the US today?
Well, to me, it shows the weakness of the US empire. If they can't handle a very tiny minority of our media or our media zeitgeist speaking the truth about these issues and revealing the opposite of the US propaganda, then clearly they're not on stable ground. And that's what's happened, is they realized that they couldn't put up. RT was a tiny percentage of viewers in America, even though they were doing quite well, but it was still a tiny percentage. And that was too much for the US empire, because I think truth goes viral rather easily. And so it became too much. And they'd been attacking and going after RT America for years. And then they used the excuse of the Russian invasion to then fully delete and remove all of our videos. And this wasn't just on television. This is all of YouTube has banned our channels. All of Spotify removed my podcast. Shadow banned on Facebook. So it's an ongoing campaign to try and get people to ignore or not see anything that refutes US propaganda.
And how are you coping with all that? What are you doing to stand up and fight, continue the fight in face of all this kind of censorship and banning?
Well, I continue to do my work at leecamp.net. I continue to do it. I have a new YouTube channel called Moment of Clarity. So I continue to create my work. But yeah, it makes it much harder when you're not on a television network. There's no doubt. And, no one said that speaking the truth against an empire was going to be easy. So I'm not surprised to see these attacks. I'm not surprised to be suppressed. But it is infuriating. And I'm not going to stop. And hopefully others won't stop either.
Right. Early 1950s, Senator Joe McCarthy and others tried to silence political opponents by accusing them of being communist or socialist, using fear and public accusations to suppress basic free speech rights. The term McCarthyism became synonymous with baseless attacks on free expression. Well, that's extremely brazen and troubling because the First Amendment of the US Constitution guarantees freedom of expression. Who stands behind McCarthyism in the US of A today, and who censors the right to free speech, and why?
Yeah, we're seeing a full-on neo-McCarthyism, and it's a term that Americans are well familiar with. And for years, we pointed to it as a shameful time in American history, and now we are doing it again. And it was amazing to watch the mainstream media go from using that term as a negative, shameful, how dare they act as McCarthyist. And now it is just done. It's just done openly to accuse anyone who speaks against the U.S. empire as communist or socialist or whatever. And you know, it has some success, but it's being done by the mainstream media, which is owned by our corporate American entities. So it really is, our mainstream media is state media, even though they deny it. It's owned by corporate America, as is our government, and they are the ones deciding these things.
Right. Now, the American public has consistently declared itself less concerned with foreign affairs in the post-Cold War era, even after 9/11, than at any time since World War II. How can it be then that public attentiveness to US foreign policy crises has increased? The author, Matthew Baum, argues that the answer lies in changes to television's presentation of political information, particularly through such kind of soft news shows and comedy shows. People would like the fun of it.
Yeah, I mean that may be part of it. I think a lot of it has to do with the information revolution that is the internet. It allowed people like me to even begin doing what I do. There were, for a long time, there were no gatekeepers. YouTube, you could become successful on YouTube and other networks. I mean, other internet sites. Without any gatekeepers, you could speak the truth against the U.S. propaganda. This had never existed before in American media landscape, and it had a big difference. It made a big difference. Had a big role in allowing people to become informed in a way they never had without gatekeepers. And now, what we've seen over the past, I'd say 8-9 years, is the ruling class trying to shut all of that down. Now, anyone who does that, goes against U.S. empire propaganda, is at least shadow banned. Sometimes you're outwardly banned and censored, like I've been, but most of the time it's a shadow banning where people won't see your posts. And it's because the ruling elite realized they had let the cat out of the bag. Too many people were becoming informed. We saw the Occupy movements. We saw the Bernie Sanders movement.
True.
We saw Black Lives Matter. All of that was created by a free flow of information.
Right. Now, of course, in this age of fake news, divisive politics, and polarized voters, it's important to understand late night political comedy's impact on political communication and public opinion, Lee. To receive political information in a humorous frame means that many viewers don't critically engage with the material. I don't know if you agree with this. In terms of soft news, public opinion, and American foreign policy, do the late night comedy shows labeled as soft news really impact people's political views in your perspective?
They can. I think it really depends on the show, on the topic. At times they can. Obviously, I use comedy in my news, and I think it's a tool. It's a tool like any other. And it can be used for good. It can be used for evil. The late night shows in America are using it to try and firm up U.S. propaganda. So in my view, they're using it for wrong. They're using it for evil. But, I use it, and I use it because people will pay attention longer. I think they often will become engaged critically. But also, I think that to say that comedy makes them not engage critically and straight news makes them engage critically. I think that's a false paradigm because
Mhm.
don't we have beautiful women on newscasts? Don't we have very good looking men? I mean, don't we have catchy videos? All of those things are designed to kind of short circuit your ability to engage critically. So I don't know that there's a difference in critical engagement between our straight news and our comedy shows. I just think that comedy often will get people to watch longer and to enjoy longer.
In this sense, do soft news viewers represent a largely untapped reservoir of unusually persuadable voters, as the writer Baum cogently argues?
I think it's an untapped group of people. I think that part is true. Easily persuadable. I'd say that most of the people who watch quote unquote hard news are surprisingly easily persuadable. I
Mhm.
know academics who believe the propaganda put forward by the New York Times. They believe it hook, line, and sinker, and you cannot talk them out of it. And these are some of the smartest people I've ever met. So I don't know that one group is better at thinking critically than another. But
Right. In a similar vein, Lee, the political media spectrum is shifting, and we need to pay attention, of course. This shift to further politicize comedic programming leaves the public in uncharted territory, according to experts. Are the late night political comedy shows, the soft news, and the traditional hard news beginning to blend together, and what impact this might have on how America and the world consumes political media, and how the shift might impact voters, as we said, and as a consequence, democracy?
yeah, I do think they're starting to blend together. A lot of the, especially cable news programs, you'll see them have a bit of snark, a bit of, it's not quite comedy, but it's humorous. It's
Mhm.
kind of close to comedy. And you will see a blurring of lines there. I think it can maybe, that's the thing. Again, it's a tool and it can be used for harm or for good. And if those people, if those cable news networks were giving people the truth and were
Mhm.
revealing the lies put forward by the US empire, it could be very useful. But instead, the only ones allowed on corporate media are going to be the ones facilitating corporate propaganda, facilitating US empire propaganda. So, they're using that tool to cause voters to support this status quo, which is US hegemony. And I think that is really sad.
Yeah, what's your latest satirical, sarcastic comment on the current affairs in the US of A?
Well, I'm putting out a video this week on the water wars. Obviously, we're in the middle of a climate crisis. The
That's very
US is doing
important. Yeah.
nothing about it. And you have Wall Street investors snatching up water. Another one I just did a video on was the US is the number one exporter of blood, paid blood, because the US, unlike most countries, allows people to be paid for their blood. It's almost exclusively poor people. So this means the US is now literally vampiric. It is
Mhm.
sucking the blood, the literal blood of the poor, in order to export it around the world. And, I knew the US empire was vampiric, but I didn't realize it was quite literally vampiric.
So, Diaries of a Vampire, not an empire,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Right. Now,
Yeah.
does watching soft news reinforce isolationism among Americans who are perhaps inattentive to public and international events, Lee? Do you agree?
I think it can create isolationism. A lot of these late night shows make people feel like they're part of a community. If you were doing that and you were talking about the real issues, then I think that could be de-isolating. It could
Hmm.
create community. But sadly, they push forward this U.S. propaganda that creates hatred and fear of others. The number of Americans that think that everybody in a certain country is evil because we're told their leaders are evil is really sad to see. I mean, we need to foster community. We nations need to work together. That is the only way we're going to keep a sustainable planet. And instead, you have these late night comedy shows just telling people to hate other countries.
Right. Well, there is a saying that goes that television is a medium that allows people to listen to the same joke at the same time, yet remain lonely.
Well, yeah, I guess television has created a lot of loneliness because the other thing, of course, is the propaganda of commercialism, where and consumerism, where
Sure.
every ad is actually selling you fear and inadequacy. So,
Mhm.
how many people take in something like 1,000 to 3,000 ads a day in America, and every one of them, at the core of it, is selling fear and inadequacy. So, it does create a lot of isolation and a lot of sadness.
Right. A 2015 article in the Atlantic magazine, How Comedians Became Public Intellectuals. Comedians are acting not just as joke tellers, but as truth tellers, which definitely you are, Lee. Satirical news became a source of political and civic information. Also, a new book, A Comedian and an Activist Walk into a Bar, The Serious Role of Comedy in Social Justice, argues that media and tech disruption create the best scenarios for social change and social justice by mobilizing the masses, focusing a critical lens on injustices, and injecting hope and optimism into seemingly hopeless problems. As an American Jew, Lee, who is pro the Palestinian cause, what obstacles and implications do you face and endure in your unwavering support of the Palestinian rights?
Oh yeah, people find it a little harder to attack me because I am a comedian, but that doesn't stop them from doing it. So yeah, despite being Jewish by birth, I am called anti-Semitic. I am first, for revealing the truth of, the fact that the Russia-Ukraine war is actually a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia. For revealing those kind of facts, I'm called pro-Russian. I'm called pro-Chinese. I'm told I'm doing the bidding of these other countries, and that goes for the Palestinian cause as well. And it really is disgusting because it dilutes the term anti-Semitic to borderline meaningless. I mean, if you're going to call those who dare reveal the truth anti-Semitic, even if you're Jewish, then it becomes a meaningless term. And so, sadly, the people who are pointing the finger and going, "Oh, you're anti-Semitic," they're actually making the term meaningless when there is real anti-Semitism in the world. But it's certainly not coming from those of us who support the Palestinian cause and criticize Israel's actions.
Right. How can comedy shape social justice movements in the West today, Lee?
I think comedy can serve to, you kind of mentioned it a moment ago, although we didn't stop to speak about it, but it makes it so people don't become disheartened. It injects a little hope. It makes it so people don't burn out. As an activist, I've seen activists often burn out and they just stop trying to fight this system because this system is so tough to be up against. It is a day-to-day fight, and if you're up against it, it's exhausting. And so there should be some laughter in a revolution. There should be some levity. There should be some hope. There should be some dancing. There should be some songs. That is the only way that people will continue to fight for change.
Great. Lee Camp, American stand-up comedian and activist. Thank you very much, Lee, for sharing your expert views on the topic. Great talking to you always.
Thank you.
لماذا نحن عرضة للأخبار الكاذبة وكيف نحمي أنفسنا منها؟ لعل مفتاح قبول الناس للأخبار الكاذبة وللتعامل معها على أنها حقيقة دامغة على الرغم من وجود أدلة عكس ذلك، ظاهرة تعرف باسم التحيز التأكيدي أو ميل الناس إلى البحث عن المعلومات التي تؤكد معتقداتهم الحالية وإلى قبولها، بينما يرفضون أو يتجاهلون ما يتعارض مع تلك المعتقدات. ينصح الخبراء الناس بتنمية عقل متفتح من خلال الاطلاع على الآراء المختلفة لاكتساب وجهات نظر وسطية أقل تطرفاً. التفكير النقدي هو المفتاح أيضاً. ينبغي أن يتعلم الناس التشكيك فيما يقال لهم، ويجب أن يبدأ ذلك ويتطور منذ مرحلة الطفولة. لكن في ظل التعتيم الإعلامي وفرض العقوبات والمقاطعة لكل رأي مناهض على مختلف المنصات الإعلامية، هل يساعد ذلك على تعزيز الفكر النقدي والانفتاح؟ من كل الميادين، سلاما وتحية، في أمان الله.